Well, hello and welcome. It's our usual Monday night date. Beyond the headlines, I'm your presenter, Odette Campbell. This evening, we're looking at an issue which has caused a little bit of controversy in recent times and needs some ventilation so that there's a common understanding of what exactly is at play. We saw a video being circulated on social media recently with some persons trying to get into Fort Judy, and there was a security guard saying it was private property and they were not allowed access. So we have been reaching out to various stakeholders so that we could help generate public understanding on what is at stake here. So we're joined this evening by the Vice President of the Fort Judy Residents Association, Mr. Chris Allie. Chris, good evening to you.
Good evening, Odette, and good evening to your viewers and listeners.
Good. And we also had reached out to Mr. Jimmy Bristol, Attorney Jimmy Bristol, who did articulate some points on this subject on GBN's To The Point program. Our producers were in touch with him today, provided the link, and we were hoping to have him on. We have not seen him as yet, so anybody who has Jimmy in their custody in terms of a conversation, a late meeting, if it's the Bar Association, please ring him and let him know that he has an appointment to keep with the GBN. In the interim, on the last minute, when we could not find Jimmy, we reached out to a Grenadian who is living in South Carolina. I hope I got that right. Mr. Frank Robinson. He is from St. George's, originally from Park Lane, St. John Street, and of course related to the Stewarts on Lothers Lane. And he lives in a private residential area, not necessarily a gated community in South Carolina. So Mr. Robinson, it's great that at the last minute you decided to pitch in to help us with the discourse this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So, Chris, let's start with you. And we saw that video at play, and we want to know exactly what has been happening there. You probably were not on the scene, but you have an understanding of what was at play there. Tell us what that was about.
Thanks, Odette. Pleasure to be here and to give a perspective of what has been happening in the Fort Judy development over the past few months, and get an idea of what, so the general public have an idea of what it's about. To start off with, the issue at the entrance was not to deny access to Fort Judy, but rather to control access to Fort Judy and what has been happening over the past few months. And it is an issue of what I would like to say, paying respect to the situation that exists in Fort Judy, and I will explain in some detail. In Fort Judy, as you may know, all the lands in Fort Judy are privately owned, including the roads. The roads are also private. So what happens in Fort Judy, traditionally and historically in Fort Judy, it used to be a kite flying area down in the point. A lot of Grenadians would have access to that during the kite season, Easter season, and fly their kites. That was stopped a few years ago because the airport authority deemed that the flying of the kites posed a danger to bypassing aircraft. So the airport authority paused the stoppage of the flying of kites in Fort Judy. So that was not an association thing, that was a safety thing from the airport authority. And then generally, we have a lot of fishermen who come down to the point and go and fish down in the areas by the rocks under the sea there and so on, which has never been an issue for us because, the fishermen have been doing that for many years. But I give that contextual background because over the years, it would appear that general public believed that the Fort Judy lands in the point area in particular probably were public lands and lands that you could have just frequented and do what you wanted. And, we have had a lot of incidences with private people doing a lot of stuff in Fort Judy. That being said, what is important to note is that all the lands in Fort Judy, especially down in the point, are now privately owned. And as a result, people, when you own private land, people have a right to how things are conducted on their land and what is done and what is not done. And in recent months, because of a particular attraction site in Fort Judy, we have seen a development of, and as I said earlier on, disrespect or lack of respect for private ownership and what happens in those areas. So you will have a lot of space and in the point where people would park indiscriminately, would litter profusely in the area, will hurt, would send, very insulting language. And most of all, on our weekends, will play very loud music and disturb the peace and quiet, especially on our weekends when people like to relax. this situation I've even gotten bad to the point where people would block the private entrances of residents and could not access their property, sometimes for quite extended periods. And then when you ask them about it, they will be very insulting about what have happened. So what we did as a result, and probably we could have given notice to people that this was going to happen, but we asked and we introduced security at the entrance of Fort Judy, next to the beach, and restricted access to the point, in particular, buses and bus loads of people that would come down and behave, have excessive drinking, be excessively loud, and so on. And this is what would have caused the controversy. Well, I don't want to say controversy, but it would have caused the public to be a little bit upset with what we did. But let me also add, Odette, that introducing security at the gate is something that we always do in Fort Judy. We normally would introduce security at various times in the year when we think that it's important to do that. So this is not the first time we have introduced security. It's just in this time we restricted access down to the point so that people got upset because they came with preconceived notions about going down there and having a good time.
But Mr. Allie, you're saying that you're restricting access, and we saw the barricade halfway across the road. How long was that installed?
The barricade has been there for many years. It is not something recent.
So what is the
and
intent?
when we introduce security at various times in the year, the barricade is also put across the road.
So it's not a permanent fixture. It's something that is mobile, yeah?
No, it's permanent, but we only drop it when we need to, when we introduce security at the gate.
Okay. So what is the intent? You mentioned that there is this attraction site that people have discovered in recent times, and there's the beach. What's the intent? That people should not use the beach, or you saying get a boat and come around, you don't necessarily have to come onto the road? Is that what you're saying?
There is no beach to the attraction point. The attraction point, as you know, is a so-called blowhole. There is no beach attached to that. There's a beach before the guard hut that is public, and the access to the beach is open to everybody who wants to partake in the beach. And even when there are beaches inside Fort Judy, there is access to the beaches. And the beaches have never been an issue. We have never denied access to any beaches. What we're saying is that when people come to visit the blowhole, their behavior is what has been causing the issue, with the excessive loud music, the excessive littering. And in any case, Odette, to access the attraction, they have to trespass on private property. The blowhole in particular is located on private lands. So this is an issue of the association with residents who own the property around the blowhole and get into the blowhole have complained about the issue of excessive littering and so on. So as an association, we had to come up with something to deal with the situation, and this is what we decided to do in terms of controlling access to that area.
But Mr. Allie, some people are questioning the timing, and they're asking whether this is in response to the fracas that occurred a couple months ago where you had a dog being killed. Is that one of the reasons why this was done?
No, this is two separate incidents. The one with the dog has nothing to do with this. If you listen to what I've said carefully, this is excessive behavior in terms of loud music, indiscriminate parking, and excessive littering, and a lack of respect for people's private property. It has nothing to do with the issue that happened with the dog. Two separate and totally different issues.
Have you had any discussions with other gated community residents or associations with regard to concerns that they have about members of the public coming on to what is now being discovered and described as private property?
Of course, there are a number of other private developments where access is restricted or access is controlled. Westerhall Point is one, and that have always been the case. And we, as an association, also have discussions with them. Again, in those developments where there are beaches, there's no access denied to the beaches. You can come. The fishermen, as I said, come and they have no issues. The fishermen don't get involved in any sort of excessive littering or any excessive behavior that is deemed a nuisance. So at the end of the day, this is nothing new.
All right, so we'll pick that up again in a few minutes. Let's cross over to South Carolina, where we have Mr. Frank Robinson. He's a Grenadian who has been living there for several years. Mr. Robinson, you've been listening on the debate in your homeland, and based on where you live in a private community, is there anything that is synonymous here?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that in most countries, there's what's called an easement. It's in the Bible. An easement is a legal right to use someone's land for, partial purpose. Sometimes it's in writing or it's in a property deed. It just allows people access to certain areas. And it's a good faith measure that you try to make sure everybody has rights to certain public areas. It is in, if you were Bible people, it's in Exodus, and it's also in Deuteronomy. And basically, the whole premise behind an easement is that in God's wisdom, he understands that that people try to move boundary lines. So basically, what's going on is that marriage, family, commerce, and the church can do a better job than government can do. So an easement is, just, as it says, it's just an easier way for people to treat each other better as human beings. So government will reach from time to time. People will try to move their property lines. They'll move their boundaries. So easements they were created so that people who don't have will still have access to whatever is granted. So, and it's a right. It's in the Bible. It's in the law. It's usually in a property deed. So I don't know what the legal issues are. Chris probably know better than I do. But a lot of times, many years ago, they would actually put something in legal writing to say, well, people will have access. They can come through the gate. They can come through the back. And it's a legal binding it's a binding agreement.
So, for instance, in South Carolina, where you live on, let's say it's a private community, and do you have covenants that determine some of the rules and some of the do's and don'ts?
Well, yeah, I mean, because for instance, like not everyone puts up a fence, when they first buy a house. It's usually, it doesn't matter how big your house is, it's usually a stump in the ground that marks where your property line is. Because in the old days, people would move their property line just to get more property. So now you really don't have to worry about that because you can get a surveyor at any time to come out. It's in your deed. It's in everything. It tells you how big your property is. A lot of people put up a fence because the fence will run right into where the property line is. But the essential thing is that the easement was made so that people wouldn't have to trespass, but they have access, if that makes sense.
So, Chris, in the Grenadian context, can consideration be given to an easement?
Well, Odette, as I said initially, where the attraction site is on private property. Now, if there is any easement to be given, the owners of the property or the owners of where the site is located on that particular land, that is a separate discussion that as a Fort Judy resident and as a Fort Judy Association member, we can't determine. If that gentleman or the person who owns it wants to negotiate that with whoever wants to access his land or give them access to his land to see the site or visit the site, then that is something that he will have to determine. But the other thing with the site where they visit, there is also a safety issue. When you look at the conditions around the particular blowhole, it is not something that you just want to access and have people drinking and getting and picnicking close to the hole itself. It can pose a danger. So there is issues surrounding that. There is a safety issue as well. And then again, it is an issue of private property and how people will access. Your other guest indicated that, if it's a public thing, then you can put an easement and have access. That is the same situation that exists in Grenada. If I buy land in front of beach, I am not to get closer than the high water mark based on the law. And if I am building in front of that beach, the beach doesn't become mine because I own the land in front of the beach. The law says all beaches are public, and you have to have access to that particular beach so that the public could go to the beach, whether it is from land or from sea. So even in Grenada, that right is protected as well. So the easement will work in that situation. But where there's a difference, the difference is this particular attraction site is on private property. And only how people can gain access to that, they will have to negotiate with the owners of the property.
Let me clarify a point. So I just want to be certain, right? What is considered, and pardon my ignorance, I'm not declaring it to be, but I'm saying what is considered, prior to all of this debate, the public road or the main road running through Fort Judy, is that private property?
It is.
Who maintains the road?
All the roads in Fort Judy are private. It is developed and done and maintained by the association.
So it was built by the members of the association. It is maintained by members of the association.
Originally, the roads were put in by the developers of the Fort Judy site. And then when the roads deteriorated, we had government come in and assist us with putting in some of the concrete roads. But the association maintains and continues to do all the roads.
Because when we were researching this matter, an attorney said to us that once the government plays a role in either constructing or maintaining the road, then it is a public road, correct or not?
No, that is not correct. The government have to declare the road to be a public road and it's done by a gazette and it's listed in the law as public road. There's a Roads Act that lists all Grenada roads as either public, and if it's not listed there, it's deemed private. And you can check that as well. And most recent one was the Maouche road leading to the Edmond development, which was subsequently declared public when it was gazetted and put within the Roads Act.
So why the difference there?
I could only tell you, Odette, that our roads are maintained by the association. So if it's maintained by us, it's private roads.
But if the government had an input, state coffers, the Canadian people would say, all of us pay taxes, and as such, if our taxes go into the construction assistance of the maintenance of the road at one point or another, then it is public facility, although it probably
it can't be deemed public because of that. It has to be more than that. It could be argued that if government assists in helping develop the roads, then so be it. But remember, when they do that, the property taxes in Fort Judy will also increase because the values of the property will go up. And as a result, we pay taxes as well for the infrastructure that would have been put in. But let's take, for example, the maintenance of the road is not just the road. You have to deal with the drains. You have to deal with all the other issues that go with the roads. And that is totally done by the Fort Judy Association.
With regard to garbage collection, is that done by the authority responsible for that?
Yeah, that is correct. They come in and do garbage collection.
A check with the authority revealed that they are not to collect garbage from private property. So if you're saying the main road, the entire area is private property, why is that happening?
I can answer that. That will have to be a question for JMSW, the Solid Waste Division. But as far as we are understood, Solid Waste Division extends the service to residents of Fort Judy. Okay, let me put it another way, Odette. All the infrastructure for water in Fort Judy is maintained by NAWASA. That doesn't make it public. What it means is that when the original developers were doing the Fort Judy development, all the infrastructure costs for water, example, was at the cost of the developer. But subsequent to that, the maintenance of the system for water has to be done by NAWASA. And we pay our rates and we pay the fixed costs for the maintenance of the system.
But let's go back to the solid waste collection issue, because it is, and we understand it from the Solid Waste Authority, that it is within the act or the rules that govern their operations that they are not to collect garbage from private property. If you're saying that Fort Judy is private property, why do you accept that
Well,
garbage
let me
collection
put
is
it to you
collected
another
there,
way.
as it's done with every other
Why
aggregator.
why then do I pay taxes on my electricity bill for the collection of garbage?
That you said to me just now. Well, Odette, I don't know about that. That is a matter for the
Yes,
Solid
but I'm
Waste
putting the
Authority.
argument to you another way. If that is the
and
case, then I shouldn't be paying for
Mr.
garbage
Dialli,
collection on my electricity bill.
Similarly, Mr. Dialli, the argument that was proffered by someone as we prepared for this was the fact that if the government in one way or another has contributed toward the upkeep, maintenance, fixing at one point of the road, taxpayers' money...
They don't contribute to the upkeep and maintenance of the road, Odette. I just told you that.
But at some point, the government had a role to play in the development of the roads, yeah?
Yes. Originally, yes, they helped with the putting in of the roads. They didn't put in the roads. All the roads was put in by the developer. When it deteriorated, we went to government, asked for assistance, and they rendered assistance. This is no different to you're living somewhere in Molineux and you have private road, you have a road where residents are living and it's a mud road, and they go to government and they ask for assistance and government puts in a concrete road. And then it's not necessarily public, but it's not necessarily private as well. As residents and as voters and as taxpayers of this country, we could go to government and ask for assistance, and government has it within its right to say yea or nay.
So, Mr. Dialli, is there any way around it? Is there anything that can be done to ensure that there's a happy coexistence?
Well, as far as we're concerned, Odette, this is not about confrontation. You know. This is about asking Grenadians to respect the rights of citizens and to respect the rights of Fort Judy residents who live in the Point and live in this peninsula. It has absolutely nothing to do with confrontation. Let me just say this: the blowhole existed for many years, and we have never had an issue with people visiting the blowhole and seeing the attraction for what it was. But in recent times, the behavior pattern has significantly changed. And the excessive littering and indiscriminate parking, loud music, and blocking people's entrance to their homes, that can't be a fair assessment of how you should behave, especially on weekends when residents would like to take a rest. I mean, that cannot be fair enough at all. So, I mean, we have to, as residents and as an association, find a way to control the access and what is happening at that particular area of the Point.
So just before we take a commercial break, a bona fide fisherman wants to go and see if he could make a catch. He's not barred from going into the area, correct?
Never have been, and I don't think we ever will. Because the fishermen don't get on in any excessive behavior, mal behavior that we have seen in recent times. And that has never been an issue with us. I have never, ever been.
And for the people who are saying that you have blocked their access to the beach, that is also not true.
That is not true. There's a beach before the gates, that there's picnics and major public gatherings. And even if there are beaches inside Fort Judy that people want to visit, they have been doing so for years, and there's access to those beaches. And we have never had an issue with it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dialli, for clarifying those points at the start of the program this evening. This is Beyond the Headlines. We'll take a commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Rubis is giving you more ways to win because you deserve it. Spend $50 or more in Ultratech fuel or purchase a Rubigas refill at any Rubis service station and get an entry card. Win one of 5 amazing grand prizes worth $2,500, including Ultratech fuel, cash, groceries, bill payment vouchers, and home furnishings. Each grand prize winner gets to donate $500 to charity too. Plus, win exciting weekly prizes, including electronics. Make sure you're in with a chance to win. Win with Rubis. You deserve it.
Need a quick, convenient way to pay your bills and avoid lines? Use the online banking feature from Republic Bank, First Caribbean, or Co-op Bank. Contact them today to set up your online banking and enjoy 24-hour convenience to make your bill payments. Stay safe. Grenlec, we are united even when we are apart.
At Communal, we are adapting to meet the changing needs of our shareholders and members. Times are changing, and with the changing times comes a whole new way to do business. Our parents may have done their banking a different way. Communal's state-of-the-art online banking and international debit card allows members to do business with great ease. It's like literally having a branch in your very own hands. Need a loan? Apply online from the comfort of your own home anywhere in the world, and your request will be dealt with remotely. Want to transfer between your accounts or another shareholder? No wait time for transactions to update. Voila! Who needs receipts when you can receive them via e-statements on your mobile device and save the environment? Not a Communal member? You can join our family today by applying online. At Communal, we see you working hard to ensure that you save, invest, and grow. Communal. Join us today. This will be the best financial decision you have ever made.
I'm reaching my dreams with GOT. They're the ones for me. I'm reaching my dreams with GOT. They're the ones for me. Since 1983, they've been serving the country, and we like all their financing, giving the people what they want, what they need, what they love. Come and join the family that's here for you all the way, from birth to graduation, your first job to your home and your car through your golden years.
The GT Credit Union has been actively supporting nation building through its many sponsorships and programs, including financial literacy quiz, Pass the Torch Calypso program, junior cooperatives in secondary schools, CPEA, and the TAMCC grants. The credit union has helped many people make their dreams come true. Let them help you with yours. You don't have to be a teacher to be a member. So what are you waiting for?
GUT Credit Union, it's where you belong.
It's new, innovative and classy, and it cut above the rest. Your one-stop shop for bathtubs, kitchenette, customized doors and windows, and even a new paint job. We also sell quartz and solid surface countertops. At M&N Hardware, we offer best prices, excellent service, efficiency, and reliability. Visit us at Dusty Highway, Grandin, St. George, or call telephone number 440-6757. M&N Hardware, from foundation to roof. Let's build together.
And welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. This evening we're speaking with Mr. Christy Allie. He's the Vice President of the Fort Judy Residents Association, and we're looking at the issue of private property, restricting access, giving access to. And I believe we have a caller who wants to get in very early on the program this evening. Just to remind all our callers that you're to keep your input to at least 1 minute so that we can accommodate as many people as possible. Caller, good evening. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, good evening, Mrs. Campbell. Good evening, Chris, Senator Humphrey here. Just a question I want clarified. I thought I heard you say that in the statute which sets up solid waste, that they are not allowed to collect refuge on private property. Did I hear you correct?
What we were told when we were researching this matter was that they are not required to so do.
Well, then I'm totally confused, because my property is private property, and they come by in a closed road and collect garbage every morning. So I don't quite understand that. Some interpretation is defective.
Some interpretation could be defective.
The point that Mr. Diali made, if they are not a law, If they are not in law,
All right, so caller,
have a responsibility to collect the garbage.
To stop, please. We are getting a reverb. You're listening both either to your television or the radio, so there's a delay. You need to turn whatever device you're listening to off, so that we can have a smooth flow.
So the Allie, but didn't receive your attention. If they are not to collect refuge on private property, then why are they then collecting rates? Because everybody pays for garbage collection by an addition to the electricity bill. So in other words, they will then be collecting something under false pretense because they would not be providing a service.
Thank you so much, caller.
Some clarification in the interpretation of the statute.
Thank you so much, caller, for that interjection there. Like I said, that is a point that was raised when we discussed this with an official of the Solid Waste Management Authority. And of course, we would have liked to fully ventilate this matter, looking at the legal aspects of this. And Mr. Jimmy Bristol had agreed to be on the panel this evening, but unfortunately, we have not heard from him. We did speak with him. The producer spoke with him earlier today and provided a link, and we had every indication that he was going to be here. Unfortunately, he has not made it in via Zoom. If he can join us at some point, we'll be so happy. Mr. Dialli, let's go back to the issue at hand. And do you think that probably the means of communication that was used is what caused this whole disturbance?
Well, probably I would say, Odette, that lack of communication in the sense that we should have advised the public that we would have been instituting what we did in order to control access to the point is probably an area that could have been dealt with better and given prior notice. What would have happened is that the measures that we took started the very said weekend, and people came and were just notified that there will be no access down to the blowhole area. And that would have created part of the issue. So I believe we could have handled it better in terms of giving prior notice. But the main point is still that this area is an area that all the property they are privately owned, and access to or trespassing on those people's property to gain access to that particular site needed to be dealt with, and dealt with from the standpoint that the owners of those properties would have to have given permission. And as far as we are aware, nothing so has happened. And these people have asked, the owners of those particular properties have asked their association to please look at the covenants and enforce the rights of the covenants that every Fort Judy member has signed to as it relates to the rules regarding properties and owning of property in the Fort Judy area.
All right, so as we continue, Mr. Dialli, as part of the research process, we looked at an article in the Tomorrow magazine, which was is based on research conducted by Ms. Susan Reutman, who has worked. She's working at the University of Queensland in Australia. She did her research at several institutions, including the University of Oxford. And so we want to look at some of the points that were raised in her research. So we'll ask the producer to assist us with some of the slides. And so she looked at gated communities and looking at some of the characteristics. In most cases, they offer good quality services and infrastructure, which include roads, recreational and sports areas, and in most cases, a clubhouse. Residents must pay a maintenance fee for these services, which means it is not always economically feasible to live in these residential developments. Therefore, the residents tend to be middle and upper middle class citizens. Help us understand these points. Do you agree with her summary there?
Well, I mean, I would say that separate and apart from being termed a gated community, and the definition for gated community will certainly refer to areas. I know, for example, in Barbados, there are developments that are termed gated communities in the sense that there exists a real gate to the entrance of those communities in a physical sense. And if you have to enter that particular community, you have to indicate as to who you're going to and what is your business. And of course, with those communities comes issues of a clubhouse that people pay towards. And the clubhouse would have various other means of entertainment and amenities like gyms and so on, that the residents of those communities would have particular access. In Fort Judy, We don't term our development a gated community because we don't have a gate across the road with constant security indicating that for you to enter inside here, you need to indicate where you're going, who you're going to, and so on. We don't have a clubhouse. We don't have those things. So we look at our situation as slightly different than being one of a private development which conveys certain rights to the residents who own property in Fort Judy. So for example, if you're an owner of property in Fort Judy, you are not allowed to come and open a pig farm because that is against the rules of the covenant. So once you intend to buy land, you are presented with a covenant with many rules and directions as to how you develop your property and what you do. And once you agree and you sign into that, then you agree to abide by the conditions that have been placed in the covenant.
Great. Let's look at another slide. The other slide would also look at the generalities. In general, there are more gated communities in suburban areas because they require considerable big areas of land. This is more expensive and harder to find in central urban areas. So, Mr. Allie, I know you don't like the phrase gated community being applied to Fort Judy, but the distinction here, big areas of land, and we're looking now at the expanse, and people have found the blowhole. And so the characterization, and we could step away from Fort Judy and look at other areas in Grenada where we have these residential areas. Is this correct in this assessment?
The assessment of that there are expansive lands in these developments?
Yeah, go ahead. And the other characteristics, sorry.
Well, no, I mean, in Fort Judy, land size is very depending on the topography and where it is. So there are areas in Fort Judy you get less than an acre, quarter of acre, and so on and so forth. The square footage will vary depending on the land and where you want to build and the topography of the land. So it's not necessarily big land as what I would say. The land is within the average reach of the average Grenadian. I will agree that the cost of land in these developments will vary depending on and compared to other areas in the country. So if you have a beachfront property, the cost per square foot of that land, whether it's in True Blue, Lansopine, Fort Judy, Wester Hall, or some aspects of St. David's, the price will vary versus one that is hinterland and has no view and has no beachfront. And I think that applies to all property developments across the island.
So what's the average area of the Fort Judy development? About how many acres of land in that development?
I can't say off the top of my head, but I can't give you an idea of how much acreage is involved. What I could say is that we have in excess of 200 plus lots in Fort Judy of various sizes.
And what's the average cost per square foot of land in there?
I can't say that either because it depends on where you want to build, whether it's beachfront, not beachfront, and whether the topography is highly steep or not. So the price will vary. But I suspect, as with everything else, it will range from somewhere between, I would say, $5, $10 a square foot to up to $20 a square foot. And
that's US dollars we're talking?
Yes, in some areas it could be US, in some areas it will be EC.
$5 EC?
Yeah.
For Judy?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on where the land is. It depends on who is selling, what the market conditions are with it, and all of that. The issue of market price and how it is determined is really an issue of demand and demand pull and what's happening to the market at the time, the economy, the country, the environment. After the revolution, what would have been $1 million house would have sold for 100, 150,000. Similarly, after Ivan, similar issues.
All right, let's go on to the next slide as we continue delving deeply into this matter. And also to remind our callers that you can get us at 440-1252. In looking at some of the characteristics, Susan said, in the case of gated communities, their main characteristic is a physical enclosure restricting access, which clearly distinguishes between those that can enter and those who cannot. There may be some gated communities where this physical element is more don't have my glasses here, and this is achieved through their geographical location. So the whole issue of allowing access and restricting access, Mr. Allie, as you have been alluding to earlier, what is happening now is that you are saying we have these covenants, these are our rights, and we are putting our foot down, we are restricting access, correct?
We are restricting access to a particular behavior pattern, and I want to make that very clear. Everybody could drive into Fort Judy. You could drive into Fort Judy right now, and nobody will ask you where you're going and what you're doing because we have no security at the gate, and it's free. You could come in and come out as you please. So there's a difference with a gated community. In a gated community, you have the access by the gate, and the entire community is fenced in or within walls. So there's only access is through that central gate. There's an entry and an exit gate, and you have to declare your interest and declare your interested party that you're going to visit in a gated community, which is quite different to what we operate in Fort Judy. That's why I say it's more of a private development with property owners having rights to their property. But traditionally and historically, you could have come in Fort Judy at any time and do what you want to do. And Fort Judy have had areas where it has been a lover's lane issue, and we have had issues with that and security breaches. And sometimes we have to call in the police to deal with certain things. But this is not restricted. You could come in and do what you want. Is when the behavior becomes deviant and you have issues where it is excessive, then we have to find a way to control the access and to control somehow the behavior that is happening.
Great. Let's go on to the next slide. And the next slide is looking at the whole issue of why people would want to live there. And it says the first reason for people wanting to live in those communities is that of safety. And Chris, forgive me for using gated community. That's the research we decided to use. The terminology may not quite fit, but fit for purpose in this case, probably. There are people who feel unsafe in cities and want to feel protected in this type of residential development. A common answer is, I want my children to be able to play in the street. There are also people that want to have access to quality urban infrastructure and services, for example, places to practice sports, safe and well-kept green areas without or around air pollution. And does that aptly describe what happens in some of our areas? You highlighted some of the other areas, and I don't want to stick to Fort Judy so that anybody takes offense. Does that describe some of what people are looking for when they buy into those areas?
Oh, yes, clearly. I mean, in any residential development, there is an issue of security and safety. We have that issue here. We have subcommittees within our structure that looks at those issues and in constant contact with the authorities when there are breaches. We have issues that deal with green areas and people having the facility to walk their dogs, go jog in the morning, do a walk. We have elderly people who decide they want to retire in these developments and residential areas. So they get the kind of peace and comfort and serenity that they need after their years of work. And these communities and these developments offer that kind of serenity and peace. And it is most individuals would retire and look for areas that could give them that sort of quality of life. For Judy and any other area that is a residential development is no different from that. And that is what happens. In a gated community, to go back to that, it offers it in a more controlled and specific area. So some communities have medical facilities, some have, as we said, the clubhouse that offers, different types of activities for the elderly if they want to be there. So it becomes more specific, and everybody contribute through maintenance fees or whatever fees, are collected as a result of living within those communities. There's no difference in some of us that have those, where we have maintenance fees that deals with certain aspects of keeping the environment clean, keeping it well trimmed, keeping the drains properly unblocked, and all of those type of things. And so we in those communities that live in those areas pay for that type of service.
So Chris, I have two goats that want to come and tie it where I see some nice green grass on the side of the road in Fort Judy. Is that allowed?
No, it's not allowed. We don't allow people to come and hunt in Fort Judy either, because the issue with hunting is that you could have indiscriminate discharges of weapons and that can cause danger to the general person that's living in the area, because the guys will hunt in the night, and it can be a security breach. So we don't allow hunting in the areas. Then when they come, there's a lot of crab times when rain fall and people want to come and pick up crab. There's no issue. They could come and pick up crabs in the area. When the fishermen go tonight to fish and they pass, that is not a concern for us either, because I say the fishermen just come to fish and do what they have to do. So it is controlled in that sense. But when it comes to hunting of the manikou and the iguanas, and they have to use rifles and shotguns and so on, no, that is not allowed.
So we did quite some research on this, like in preparation for the program, right? So we had one resident, in another area, not in Fort Judy, who said, he had an issue with a man on his property with a gun, and he's telling him, listen, this is my property. You're not supposed to be here with this gun. And he tells him, listen, for years I have been hunting here, and this is public property, and I can hunt here.
Now, you see, therein lies the contradiction. It can't be private property and public property at the same time. And if the gentleman who has title to his property wants to protect his property, then the person who wants to come and hunt is trespassing, and the person who owns the property have every right to protect his property. That is your God-given right under the law.
Great. And I believe we have a caller on the line. Caller, good evening. Hello. All right. We seem to have lost that caller there. Let's go back to the slide. I think we're at slide number 4 or 5. There's only 2 more we have remaining. So apart from these reasons, and we were looking at the whole issue of people wanting a certain quality of life, many gated communities are elements of social distinction and is an extremely important issue for some families. They want to show that they are part of the winners of this economic system, and they have good social networks. They also seek to distance themselves from people belonging to other social groups which they consider to be dangerous. For example, poor people, delinquents, or people of lower social standing. Blacks and Latinos was included there. So let's come off the slide. In the interest of full disclosure, because we were dealing with Grenada, the issue of blacks and Latinos was included, but I deleted those 2 words because I didn't think that they applied. So Chris, what are your thoughts here? And let's broaden the scope and not limit this to Fort Judy. Let's have a wide discussion to educate the public.
Well, social separation, whether it be via property, whether it be via developments, happens in every strata of life. The reason we send our children to school and educate them is to move them from one place to the other. And traditionally, in our context and our social construct, education has always been a way to get somebody to move out of a particular social, economic strata into the next one, if they so pursue it, and is ambitious enough to rise to the pinnacle. And we have always educated ourselves and our children to ensure that you achieve the best in life in whatever area you choose to pursue. And if that has the impact of moving you from one social stratus to the next one, so be it. But it all depends on how you manage your social structure movement. So I could ascend to the ladder to the highest heights, but never forget where I've come from. And my behavior pattern and how I treat people when I move up or I move across has nothing to do with my social achievements. And that is an individualistic position that you have to take. So social stratification based on economic movement is a natural phenomenon of life, and that is what we all strive for. And living in particular areas where you choose to live would probably put you in that social strata, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that is what you come there for. You might come there because, as I said, you don't want a man to put a pig farm next to where you're living, and you want to live in a certain surreal environment that gives you the aspect of peace and comfort when you come from a hard day's work and you want to relax.
Okay, great. And we have a call on the line before we go across to a commercial break. Caller, good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, caller.
Yeah.
Good evening. Just remember to turn your listening device off and to keep your point brief. We need to cross over to a commercial break in like 90 seconds. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm making a point. Let me tell Mr. Daly, when I was very young, I'm a little bit old now, I can't say I heard exactly what he says, but he seemed to tell him that when I was young, and I used to lime, underline the word lime. I used to go into Fort Judy, and then they used to have a securities there with a gate, so they were never exposed to the public as maybe he's trying to communicate. I expect maybe if I were to ask him how long is he living there, that would tell me then he doesn't know or he's trying to cover up. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I can answer the caller. I've been living in Fort Judy 20 plus years. So when I came in, there were far less residents than there are now. So I don't know if that will help, but I'm not purporting to have all the entire history of Fort Judy. We always had a guard hut in the entrance down by the beach, as far as I'm aware, historically. But the guard hut has never been manned 24 hours, 365 days a year. That is my understanding.
Thank you so much. And we're to cross the commercial break, but let me just take this caller quick. Chris, we'll save the response to the caller just so that I don't keep them on the line for 2 minutes. Caller, good evening. Can you be as quick as possible? All right, we have to come back because the person is not listening to us. They're not turning the device down. This is Beyond the Headlines. We take a commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Need a home, car, education, dream vacation? The National Lotteries Authority's Lotto Jackpot is $302,000. Play today for chances at a more satisfying life. Lotto. Play and win a lot of money.
A pleasant evening to everyone. Welcome to the National Lotteries Authority's Lotto Draw number 3126 for today, Monday, October 12, 2020. I am Anisha Charles. With me this evening is Ms. Joseph Clark from PKF Accountants and Business Advisors, whose purpose is to ensure that this draw is conducted in an accountable manner and the game balls with industry standards and in a way tampered with. At this time, your tickets at hand because you are about to play for a jackpot of $302,000. But first, your free ticket letter. Good luck. This evening's free ticket letter is check your tickets. Your free ticket letter for this evening is a B, as in bingo. Let's proceed for 5 winning numbers. Good luck. First number for this evening is check your tickets in the meantime. First number is 16. Second number is 21. Third number up. Third number is 20, followed by 10. Fifth and final number. Final number is 29. Let's do Campbell's numbers. Check your tickets. First number up is 16. The second, 21. Third, 20, followed by 10. Fifth and final is 29. So that's 1616, 2121, 2020, 1010, and 2929. Your free ticket letter for this evening is B, as in bingo. Congratulations to all the winners of this evening's Lotto Draw. Lotto, play and win a lot. When you play all the games of the National Lotteries Authority, support sports, culture, and nation building. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.
I'm a winner. You are winner. We are winners. Winners.
It's the big one. Grenada. Imagine winning $25,000 and up to 6 times by scratching just one little ticket. Get your triple cash scratch tickets for a chance to live your best life. Win easy with Scratch. For just $3, match any of your numbers to any of the winning numbers and win the prize shown for that number. Reveal a money back symbol and win the prize instantly. Triple cash scratch in stores now. Must be 18 or older to play.
Cause I'm a winner. From the moment that I get up, I'm feeling right.
Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. We were trying to accommodate a call, just to remind our callers that when you call into the program, you need to mute the radio and the television. You'll hear the conversation through the phone line. And we'll continue with our callers this evening. But Mr. Allie, we went to commercial break. Is there any particular point that the Residents Association wants to get across to the public?
Well, I mean, in particular, Odette, it is about, as I started off the program saying, it's about how we treat and respect property owners and their property. And, you know, for many years, Fort Judy have had an issue with littering and garbage. They meant sometimes twice a year, the residents will move around and pick up garbage in the swamp area. We will pick up garbage down in the point itself and walk around to all the beaches in Fort Judy and pick up. And most times you will get 10 plus garbage bags, large garbage bags of garbage that people just dispose indiscriminately throughout the development, all throughout the trees, all throughout the grass. You know, there'll just be an indiscriminate amount of littering. And we have always done that in the past as residents to keep the environment clean and nice and welcoming to everybody who wants to enjoy it. So it is generally about our public and our people taking a little more care and paying a little more attention to what they do and how they do, and understanding that all of these areas in Fort Judy are privately owned, and people need to respect that. And it's all about that. I mean, when people come to the beach at the front of Fort Judy, where there's a lot of picnics that happens, people pitch tents, they spend weekends, and so on, there's a serious amount of garbage accumulation. We normally would have bins for them to put garbage in. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And we maintain that area. We make sure it's cut properly. There's some other guys who frequent the area who have been helping in recent times. So there is a community involvement to some degree. But the general gist of this conversation is that people need to understand that there is a certain amount of respect that must be offered and must be, given to the average person who lives here, whether they a property owner or not. And that is all that we're asking. And it has been done over the years. We have never had that issue. It has only cropped up recently. And we're just saying that, you know, people need to be moderate in what they do and how they do and pay attention to the little things. Like if you come to picnic, we wouldn't stop you generally if you want to picnic. Some people pull up on the side of the road on the verges, open the back of the trunk, take out their food, sit there and have a meal with their family. That is not an issue for us, and it has never been. It's when they go to the excessive behavior with the loud music and the garbage dumping and the drinking and so on, then we have an issue.
Okay. We have a call on the line. Caller, good evening. Yes. Caller, hello.
Hello.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yes, I'm saying I find this a very interesting discussion this evening. Are you hearing me?
Yes, go ahead. We're hearing you loud and clear.
Okay, and it's generally a tussle or some situation that we have to take into account between public access and the private property. I was listening to Chris tonight, and I mean he's bang on in terms of the fact that this is private property there for Judy, and that you have what you call a gated community. And he says, well, the gated community is one where basically there's a gate or there's a wall. Although I think we should focus more on the symbolic situation where it concerns places like Fort Judy and Wester Hall and Egmont. Because symbolically, we are saying it's a gated community because there is a certain kind of separation, even by perception, between people in Egmont and Wester Hall and Fort Judy and the Fort Judys and other parts of Grenada and other parts of the Caribbean as well. By perception, even though you don't have a gate there, you understand that there's a particular difference, and one has to take that into account. But basically, it is one whereby I think in those areas, those private property areas as such, where people enjoy a certain standard of living, where people would have paid some premium prices for the property and look forward to certain situations in terms of the salubrious nature of the surroundings and so on, and the noise pollution levels being at certain decibels, if you want to put it that way. The important point that one has to make is that if in that case, in terms of the case of the security officer or the security guard stopping people from coming in because the residents of Fort Judy thought that there was an encroachment as such, which had not been happening over the years, owing to the result of that encroachment, i.e. the noise pollution the garbage and things of that nature strewn all over the place, then the residents have a right to look into that and have a right to express some concern about that. The fact is, however, to bring about a certain measure of understanding and to alleviate the fact that the public perception may be that you want to keep us away from the property when over the years people have been coming there and so on, is to have sometimes some public service announcements, maybe some announcements on the new scheme of things, now that we are concerned about what is happening, to set up perhaps certain to erect signage, some signs and so on, no dumping of refuse, please keep down the noise, or no noise pollution in the area, some way in which people could understand. And if you have those public service announcements, or you have those announcements via the community, the newspaper and so on, and people get wind of it, there are people who in this country who are extremely environmentally conscious, who would understand that you ought not to be dumping refuse, and you ought to keep down the noise pollution levels, and you ought to behave with a certain amount of decorum in an area where residents are living, and have some concerns about the elderly in the area and so on. So it's a measure of understanding that one has to look at. And remember, Mrs. Campbell, in this era we have a situation where protest and demonstration is the order of the day. And sometimes sometimes in the Caribbean and other parts of the world, we are being sort of led by what happens when we look at the corporate media like CNN and we see all the protests and so on happening in the United States. It doesn't mean that we don't have the need to protest there, and we don't have the need to demonstrate there, but we also understand that at this point in time, in this era, people are very touchy, and the society is becoming a lot more litigious in some form. And therefore, we have to...
Do you think that what happened at Fort Judy, time flies quickly, so it's possible that 3 months have elapsed. Let's say 3 months ago with the killing of the dog caller, do you think, for instance, that would have triggered the response from the Fort Judy Residents Association?
I don't know that these two are connected, but certainly people are concerned about the whole business of private property. Look what happened in St. David in terms of La Sagesse. I think it's the La Sagesse area, that beach there where people are saying that there are owners there that debarred them from entry, and they were engaging in some development whereby the surrounding community was not engaged. So we have to find a way to be able to live together, understanding the issues, understanding the two sides of the divide and what concerns people. Because, and therefore, the residents, like Chris said, he's correct that they had to take certain kinds of action. They had to take evasive action to protect what they had before, because they have made contributions on how the community should be looking, how the environment should be looking, the noise levels and so on.
Even if they had to take action, caller, do you think, for instance, was the security guard the best conduit of information?
Perhaps the security guard was not the best conduit of information. Maybe somebody else, maybe the security guard should have been prepared and maybe explain or express the concerns of the residents. That's why I said, if there was some kind of communication via radio or some public service announcements expressing concern about the level of noise pollution and the level of refuse being strewn all over the place and so on near the blowhole, maybe that would have reached the public in a certain way and would have prepared them for the fact that now there's going to be action taken in terms of people's entry into the so-called gated community without a gate, but which by perception is a gated community even without the gate.
Thank you so much, caller, the gated community without the gate. Thank you so much, Mr. Allie. So we have a rechristening of Fort Judy. It's the gated community without a gate.
Let me just say to
the caller's contribution.
The aspect of the fact that we are on this Beyond the Headlines program tonight is to give information and to educate generally the public as to what exists and what happens in Fort Judy. So I agree with him that there is a certain amount of education and public dissemination that must take place. And I did say earlier in your program that if there was one area that we thought we could have done better, was how we communicated to the public that we were preparing to deal with this situation in the particular way we dealt with it, and not just introduce this sudden thing of the security. Now, the caller talked about distinction, and one of the things that distinguishes owners in Fort Judy is the covenants that they sign up to, and the rules and so on that govern what you do in Fort Judy with your property and how it's developed and how these developments can take place. Similarly, when we talk about signage, and he spoke about signage, there were signs that were put up on people's property saying this is private property, no littering. The signs were taken away and removed and destroyed in some instances by the people who came there and who wanted to park indiscriminately on people's property. So not that we didn't try the aspect of signage, that was also tried. And we had a rude awakening in terms of how the signs were dealt with. So, it's a number of things that would have led to this before we did what we did. I mean, there is even a situation where we have speeding in the development, indiscriminate driving and driving at high rates. If you come in our development, you will notice that we have to put humps to cause a reduction in the speeding. And if you have residents living here and want to walk their dog or jog or walk, and you have people speeding, it becomes a security and safety issue. So all of these are issues that we have been dealing with over the years. And as I say, Odette, yes, it's a gated community without a gate, if that's how the caller wants to restrict it. I will say it is not. I say it's a development that has particular rules on how we do what we do. And we're happy to engage with the public and have them come and enjoy the same lovely scenery and things that we have. But it must be done in a controlled fashion. And the residents who live here mustn't pay a price for living here because other people want to come and enjoy it in a particularly excessive manner.
We have another caller on the line. Caller, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, please.
Yes, good evening.
Go ahead.
Yes, at first, I did not really agreeing with Mr. Allie, but after he explained concerning the freedom, I would put it that way, they can go there, almost any time. But the behavior, I think this is what they're mostly concerned about, And sometimes Grenadians like to party in some cases, and wherever they feel like playing loud music, they just play loud music and then drink and get on and throw all the garbage, litter the place and so on. I think this is something that we should be very mindful about, that the residents want to be quiet, whether it's in Fort Judy or even any public places, wherever. I think we should respect the citizens, whether it's rich or poor or whoever, old or young, respect and play soft music, because there is something I believe in the law called noise pollution, and therefore I think for Judy is no exception. They should have the place very quiet as they would like to. I think that's the reason why they pay so much to get the land and to build in that quiet area. Now in Westerhall, I've been recently visit Westerhall. There is a gate in Westerhall, but they never forbid anyone from going into Westerhall during the daytime, except in the night. There is a gate, there is a security in the gate. You have to have the number of the home that you're going to visit and so on, the phone number. And if you're going to visit anybody in this area, the guy in the gate, the security would already know that they're expecting you, They expect you, so then you have no problem going inside Westerhall in the day. But that is only in the night. The security would be there and checking, as I know.
All right.
In Fort Judy, I have some friends who have buildings, houses in Fort Judy, and sometimes, I do taxing, So sometimes I go there to check my friends, and some of them, they don't live here. I would just pass around and see how the house looking and the gates and whatever it is, So I think having the place free for the public, except if we decide to play the fool, then you have the right to keep all this, and to protect the citizens who live in that area, especially the elderly, when I was very young, I used to love loud music.
Okay, so caller, I would love to indulge you some more, but we try to free up the lines so that as many people as possible could get a call in. So we'd have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much. Very interesting point of view. So, Mr. Diali, you have converted at least one soul. He said at the start he did not agree with you, but no, he's bought into your argument.
Well, I mean, it's all about education, Odette. I don't think I'm here to convert. I think it's just to let people know that Port Judy residents are no different to somebody living in Molineux, living in, Mount Morris or St. David's, wherever. Everybody's right needs to be respected, and everybody's frame of mind or peace or whatever they want must be respected. And I think that is what it's about. It's nothing about, denying access or any of these things that have come out. And some of the more emotional things that you would see on social media. It's not about that at all. It's all about that and all about people having respect for property and people and persons.
All right. So I have a question that just cropped into my head, but I hope I remember. We have a caller. I'm trying to accommodate as many people as possible. Caller, good evening.
Yeah, good afternoon. Odette.
Please.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good evening. You hear me clear?
I am hearing you loud and clear.
Okay. This is Grandpa Chain speaking from Labarry. Yeah.
Grandpa Chain?
Yeah, this is Grandpa Chain, the Carlsonian, speaking from Labarry. I know for Judy.
How the old bones going?
Well, it's going good now, it's getting better. It seems like more I get old, the more it gets free.
We need no CRC, right?
Yeah. So here what's going on. I've been going in. You listening? You hear me?
Yeah, are we running out of time, Grandpa? So, Grandpa, let's get going down the road quick.
Yes. I've been going in for Judy from since I was a child, as young as 9 years and them kind of thing. Me and my boys and them we go in and fish and collect crabs and what have you. And I talking about when there was a track, bush on left side, just a track to go inside it. And then they come, when the place started to develop and everything. And nobody ever warned the hamburgers from going inside it. I, by myself, go inside it alone, in and out. A big car, when they develop cars, vehicles, ban everything, but nobody ever hamburged me. Yeah? And I also know when it developed, there was a time when they go inside it and break people's house. I could remember when people even get raped inside it and all them kind of things. And it moved from one state to the next. Nobody never hamburg anybody. And so I know when the borehole started to bust, it was a little hole busting with the water from the sea, busting, vibrating under the ground and just busting, little thing and going down. And when people come and people say, don't pass it, you have a hole inside it. So I know from the beginning. And nobody, it keep busting and busting and busting. And all of the now I go inside it and nobody don't hamburg me. So I know definitely that what Mr. Diali is saying is true. I believe fully and I know they ain't hamburging nobody from going in there. But there's what going around that pool, and I believe that. And we have to understand that Grenada becoming a very disrespectful, we have a disrespectful young population going on now. So kudos to Mr. Diali and his development. Hold on to the security inside this. When I go inside me alone, I like to feel that security inside it because people don't even go down there and hide in the bush and tease people pause and all them kind of thing when they put down and go in the sea. People want to go to work, man.
Grandpa Chain, thank you so much. Mr. Diali, I see you smiling. You get a second convert. Church full enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a gentleman that knows the area from since childhood. And as I said, it's good to hear confirmation of what I don't know Port Judy from childhood, but I certainly know it for the past 20 plus years. And I know exactly what he's talking about. And the other thing with it, Port Judy is a very historical place as well. The same beach to the front and the gate where a lot of people picnic and have fun. We are told historically that as the first beach and the first area when the British came to Grenada in a very long past of history. That is where they landed. That is where the first boat anchored. So there is history. And we understand that as well.
All right. I realize that when we're trying to tamp this down, it's racking up because I have a question I really want to get in, and I want to play the natural ambience under that blowhole so that people get to appreciate the air. But we have a caller. Caller, good evening. All right, I'm hearing the feedback. We don't want to waste time, caller. You can call us back when you mute your television or your radio. Mr. Diali, the question is, tour operators, are they debarred from taking visitors to the site?
Right now, yes. They are debarred because, as I said, when the tour operators will come, they have to trespass on people's property to get to the blue hole. And unless that issue is resolved in terms of them having access to the blue hole through the owner of the property, if they choose to go that route, then that is how it will happen. But as it is now, if we deny anybody else for the reasons of trespassing on people's property to get to the blue hole, they are also included as part of that. That is a sad situation because the tour operators would have come. They used to come and show people where the area was, enjoy the scenic thing of the blue hole. They never engage in the behavior that we were talking about. So the tour operators, we had conversations with one or two of them, and they will start to learn that this is a situation because their particular focus is not that. It's to come and let people enjoy and see a natural development that is pretty scenic as well. And they never engage in littering and the deviant behavior I spoke about. So unfortunately, it applied to them as well. And until we can get the issue of access resolved with the people who own property in that particular area, we have to deny access to them as well.
So, Mr. Diali, there's this thing about land acquisition, and the government acquires land or property in the public interest. Can the government acquire the area surrounding the blowhole in the public interest?
I suspect that is an issue for the government. The people who own the particular land where the blowhole is, if the government deems it necessary and the tourism authority within their purview believes that is a significant enough attraction that they want to acquire a section and have that discussion with the property owner, I suppose that is something they could pursue. But the whole issue of access also needs to be determined. And of course, the safety of how you access and do what you do by the blowhole has to be addressed as well.
All right. We have a caller who really wants to get in this evening. Caller, good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Diali, do you believe it's the COVID-19 that have been causing so much disturbance in the Fort Judy? People become, as the psychologists and them would say, the people now are disturbed, their minds are disturbed. And at the same time, I'm glad that you and others are educating the people or the public. And please don't believe education is reading and writing and mathematics. You are educating the people. And as what the lady, the announcer says, I always feel that government has the right to sell and to repurchase, especially in the interest of the people. In other words, if they want to buy the borehole or to repossess it, they would pay the people according to the cost, the present day cost. So they could buy the place, they could take it back and give them somewhere else. Because once it's for tourists and for the attraction, for the people's purpose, you could take anything in the country for the people's purpose. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Diali, before you delve into that, one of the things that I wanted to do before we close off this evening, several people have heard of the blowhole. I have never been there, but in researching this issue, one of the things we want to do is to just play like 20 seconds of the ambience under the blowhole so that people who've not been there get a sense of what it looks and sounds like. We've played the video. Right, so there we had it. Some of the natural songs, the ambience coming from the blowhole. And Mr. Diali, as we wrap it up this evening, we have like 90 seconds. Your closing thoughts?
Thank you, Odette. Again, I mean, the reason we agreed to do the Beyond the Headlines program is, of course, let Grenadians know that we're not in a confrontation mode in denying access. It is all about controlling access and letting people understand that this is about respecting people's rights and respect that must be given to people's ownership of private property and to themselves as well, because there have been a lot of abusive encounters since this issue has started. And we just want to say to John Public that Fort Judy has always been an accessible area. There's never been one where we denied access. But you need to behave and you need to have respect. And this is what we expect from every Grenadian to one another. And I agree with the caller in the sense, the last caller that spoke about the COVID situation. And I know a lot of us have cabin fever because of the lockdown and what would have happened over COVID. And the supposedly restriction or the perceived restrictions in how we must behave, what we must wear, how we must address sanitization and all of that. And that is something anti-social to what we know as the norm, because we are social beings and we need to interact with one another. But we cannot do it at the expense of others. And I think that is what we're trying to say here in Fort Judy as residents, that we must pay attention to what we do and how we do it. And, try not to be excessive and abusive, because at the end of the day, it serves none of us in a positive light and a positive fashion. So Odette, we want to thank all the persons who, have expressed opinions on this, whether positively or negative. And we, as an association, will try our best to improve what we do and how we do it. And as I said earlier, probably the communication lines could have been a little bit better and clearer and probably more proactive than reactive. And we will endeavor to do that in the future as we go forward.
Chris, and the sad thing about these programs is that when we need to wrap it up, that's when the volume gets turned up. I'm going to just read these 3 questions and leave them. They're not for you to answer. Probably we'll have you back on to the point. We have somebody who's asking, what are the procedures that educational institutions should follow to explore the geographic features in the area? Also, why was institutions not adequately supported by the association in the past when emails and letters were sent to them seeking assistance in facilitating educational visits? And also, can residents truly restrict access to the coastline? Just had those coming in on the WhatsApp. Unfortunately, we are out of time. It's 10 o'clock and get a signal from the producers. Ms. Campbell, it's time to wrap up. I would like to thank every person who contributed toward tonight's discussion, who assist us with the research: Janelle McDonald, Mike Alexis, Kellon Batiste. On behalf of the entire News and Current Affairs team, I'd like to thank Mr. Allie. We did ask and invite attorney Jimmy Bristol to join us. Unfortunately, we have not had any wind of him. We'll have a discussion tomorrow to see what happens. He did speak with the producer earlier today, as we mentioned, so we had every indication that he was going to be on. We want to thank Frank Robertson, who joined us out of South Carolina for a brief moment at the start of the program to compare notes a little bit. Mr. Allie, I'm forever grateful to you for taking the time. Some people shy away from these discussions, but it has been educational and interesting, and I have learned a lot. And I just want to thank you sincerely for attending to this very important matter. To all our viewers and listeners,
thank you very much, Odette.
You're most delightfully welcome. And I have one very good friend at the fish market. Her name is Eluta. Eluta, if you're listening tonight, if you haven't fallen asleep yet, I always want to send you hugs and kisses. She says that she sends all of these hugs and kisses to the television screen. Eluta, I love you. I love all of my viewers and listeners. Thank you so much. Grandma, I'll see you again tomorrow morning. We go walking, right? Bye, everybody.